I bought my house 5 years ago, the very first thing I fell in love with wasn't the wraparound porch, or the original hardwood floors, or even the cozy fireplace. It was the tree. A massive, decades-old oak tree that stood like a sentinel in the middle of my front yard. Its limbs stretched wide, casting a perfect patch of shade across my lawn every afternoon. My grandfather told me once that a good tree gives more than it takes. This one, it had soul. Kids used to sit under it with library books. Squirrels practically held family reunions in its branches. So when Karen from the HOA came knocking, clipboard in hand, short blonde bob vibrating with purpose, I knew something bad was about to happen. She'd even say hi. She pointed to the tree. "That thing has to go," she said. I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "It's an eyesore," she continued, like she was personally offended by the bark. "It blocks the view from the street. It sheds leaves into 3 different yards. And it doesn't match the community's open green concept." I stared at her, then looked at the tree. "This tree's been here longer than any of the houses in this neighborhood." Karen folded her arms. "Well, it's not approved. And according to HOA landscaping guidelines, section 3.4, no single structure, natural or man-made, should obstruct curbside sightlines or present aesthetic imbalance." I wanted to ask who came up with phrases like aesthetic imbalance, but I was too annoyed to bother. "Karen, it's a tree, not a billboard." Her smile turned tight and thin. "Well, we'll see what the board says." Now, I'd lived through HOA drama before, over lawn height, mailbox color, the time I left a garden hose visible for too long, but this was a new low. Still, I figured I'd fight it like always, send a letter, attend a meeting, get Stan on my side, the one neighbor with common sense, sure. But I wasn't worried, until the day I came home from work and saw it. Half my tree was gone. One entire limb, maybe 25 feet long, had been hacked off. Clean cut. Jagged stump left behind like an open wound. There were sawdust trails on the grass, and tire tracks in the dirt near the base of the trunk. First I thought maybe there was an accident. A storm? Lightning? A city work crew? But then I saw it, tucked under a rock by my doorstep. A folded HOA notice, signed in red ink. "Tree trim to maintain compliance. Further action pending full removal. Mona K. W. Karen." She cut my tree without even telling me. I stood there, heart pounding. I wasn't even mad at first. I was stunned, like someone had slapped a book out of my hands in the middle of reading it. The tree wasn't just a plant. It was part of this home, part of me. And now it stood there, awkwardly lopsided, bark peeling near the wound. The empty space above my porch like a missing limb. I stormed over to Karen's house, 3 doors down, rang the bell, hard. She opened the door like she was expecting a thank you note. "You're welcome," she said before I could even speak. "It looks so much better already, doesn't it?" I stared at her. "You had no right." She shrugged. "The HOA has the right to maintain visual standards. You were warned." I took a deep breath. "You touched my property without permission. We took a nuisance limb, not the whole tree. And you hired some guy to do it?" She didn't answer. "You didn't even use a licensed arborist, did you?" Still silence. "I hope for your sake," I said slowly, "that nothing happens to that tree. Because if it falls, or breaks, or causes damage, you are legally liable." Erin rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. We did you a favor." And with that, she shut the door. That night, I stood out on my porch and looked at the wounded tree. I ran my hand along the rough cut, already beginning to darken. It was unstable now, off balance. Any arborist would have told her you never cut from that angle. You compromise the integrity of the whole structure. And sure enough, just before midnight, the clouds rolled in. The wind started to pick up. I remember looking at the sky and thinking, please don't let this happen. But fate had other plans. The rain came in sideways. It wasn't even a full-blown storm, just one of those early summer squalls that rolls in fast, dumps half the atmosphere, and disappears before midnight like a hit and run. But the wind? That wind meant business. I barely slept, not because I was scared, but because I was pissed. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind whistle through the siding, and replaying Karen's smug voice in my head over and over again. It looks so much better already. Ah, doesn't it? Ah, it didn't. The tree looked hurt, off-kilter. Every time a gust hit the house, I held my breath and braced for the sound of cracking wood. But nothing happened. Not yet. I finally drifted off somewhere around 3 o'clock a.m. And that's when I heard it. Crack. It was like thunder, but dirtier. Like nature snapping a giant pencil in half over a steel drum. My heart jumped straight into my throat. I ran to the window, expecting to see a branch in my driveway, or maybe on my roof. What, my house? Totally untouched. Karen's? Not so lucky. One of the major upper limbs, the one she had caused to become structurally unsound, had finally given out. All that weight, weakened and uneven, now redirected straight toward her property. He missed the sidewalk, missed the fence, but it didn't miss the corner of her roof. Or specifically, her kitchen. A good 6 feet of splintered oak was now buried through the shingles, framing, and according to later reports, her cabinets. Pots and pans were scattered across the lawn, like the tree had declared war on dinner prep. Blue and red flashing lights lit up the street 20 minutes later. Karen stood outside in a robe and slippers, talking rapidly to 2 officers and a firefighter. Even from across the street I could hear her. That tree was dangerous. I told him it was unsafe. I tried to fix it. Oh, now she tried to fix it? I threw on a hoodie, walked over, and stood on the edge of my lawn, arms crossed, just watching. Aaron caught sight of me and immediately pointed like a villain in a Scooby-Doo episode. There, that's him. It was his tree. He should have had it removed months ago. One of the officers turned to me. Is it true the tree's on your property? I nodded. Yep, planted it myself. Or, well, my grandfather did. It's been there for 60 years. And you didn't have any work done on it recently? The officer asked. I tilted my head. The firefighter standing by Karen's porch cut in. Actually, we noticed fresh cuts. Someone removed a major limb without supporting the rest of the canopy. Looks like the imbalance caused the failure. Karen's eyes widened. That's not my fault. I had to take action. The HOA has rights. I pulled out my phone. Actually, I've got footage of your guy trimming it, without my permission. Want me to airdrop it? The cop blinked. You have video? Motion-activated cameras. Front yard. I shrugged. I was planning to file a report anyway. Karn took a step forward. You can't blame this on me. That tree was a hazard. I had every right to intervene under community code. No, you don't, I cut in. You had no legal authority to touch my property. And now a limb from a tree you tampered with fell and damaged your own home. That's not my fault. The second officer sighed and walked off to make a note. The first stayed and stared at the carnage. I didn't say it out loud, but I wanted to. Karma doesn't always knock. Sometimes it crashes through your kitchen ceiling. The next morning, Karen tried to file a claim with her homeowner's insurance. It was denied. The reason? Damage was caused by unauthorized alteration of neighboring property resulting in self-inflicted loss. The translation, you cut someone else's tree and it bit you back. That's on you. I got the news from Stan, who served on the neighborhood insurance board, and practically giggled when he told me. He's looking at close to 15 grand out of pocket, he said. Roof, drywall, cabinetry, some plumbing. And she's trying to argue it's your fault. It's not. He smirked. We know. I walked outside that afternoon to check on the tree. Even wounded, it still stood tall. A little lopsided, a little scarred, but still rooted. And I realized then, the tree wasn't the only thing Karen had tried to cut down without permission. She'd tried to cut me out too. But like that oak, I wasn't going anywhere. I always thought people like Karen were bulletproof. Not legally, obviously, but in that smug, overconfident way that makes you think this person's never had to deal with consequences in their life. Well, not until now. Whenever the tree limb demolished her kitchen roof, the neighborhood was buzzing, not because of the damage, that was impressive, but because of the irony. The HOA president, who tried to control every mailbox, lawn ornament, and curtain color, had managed to wreck her own house by breaking her own rules on someone else's property. I didn't need to post anything about it. I didn't need to tell the story. Everyone else did it for me. By Tuesday, the incident had earned itself a nickname around the block. The fall of Karen. Well, Karen wouldn't go down quietly. That week, she marched door to door handing out flyers, accusing me of willful negligence, endangering public safety, and, my personal favorite, malicious arboreal obstruction. She tried to claim that I had strategically allowed the tree to become unstable so it would collapse on her house. That's right. According to Karen, I was some kind of tree assassin. The best part? She was distributing these papers while her own roof was still covered with a giant blue tarp, flapping in the wind like a surrender flag. I knew it was time to act, not out of vengeance, but protection. So I filed a formal trespassing and property damage complaint. I submitted video footage of the unauthorized cutting, photos of the limb that fell, a copy of the HOA charter proving no clause allowed unilateral landscaping on private property, and the letter Karen had left taped to my door. And then I CC'd it to two places: the city zoning office, the HOA legal oversight board. Let me tell you, Karen had never seen a fax number appear on so many documents in her life. A week later, she received two letters, one cease and desist from the city for illegal tree modification without a permit, and one notice of censure from the HOA Advisory Council, citing abuse of authority. She tried to argue at the next board meeting, claimed she was just acting in the community's best interest, that trees are unpredictable, and that certain homeowners have become hostile, but the board had turned. Even her inner circle, people who used to nod every time she cleared her throat, sat stone-faced while she rambled. Stan, bless him, just leaned back and said, "So, to recap, you illegally cut a neighbor's tree that then collapsed onto your own house, and you want him punished?" She looked like someone had unplugged her brain mid-sentence. "I was trying to enforce safety," she snapped. "No, Karen," I said from the back of the room. "You were trying to enforce control." Silence. Then, softly, someone clapped. Just one person at first, then another and another. I didn't ask for it. I didn't expect it. But man, it felt good. Back at home, I stood under the damaged oak tree and looked up. He called in a certified arborist, a real one this time, to assess it. He said it would recover. A few years of pruning and care, and it would be strong again. Not perfect, but resilient. "I've seen worse come back," he said, running his hand along the bark. "This one wants to live." I smiled. "So do I." A few days later, Karen finally called a contractor to begin the repairs on her home. I passed by while they were measuring the gaping hole in her roof. She refused to make eye contact, but her contractor did. "Hell of a tree," he said, nodding to mine. "Hell of a neighbor," I replied. We both laughed. 2 weeks after the tree fell, Karen's roof was still covered in blue tarp, flapping in the wind like a surrender flag nobody bothered to take down. The contractors had come out to survey the damage, left her an estimate that could fund a decent used car, and then quietly disappeared after learning her insurance company had denied her claim. Again. See, here's the thing about homeowners insurance. They'll cover accidents, not acts of ego. And when Karen handed in her claim, she left out the part about hiring a guy off Craigslist to hack my tree without permission. Unfortunately for her, my complaint to the city included that exact detail, complete with time-stamped footage and written confirmation from the arborist I hired post-storm. Her insurer took one look at the report and stamped her file with "Claim denied, liable, third-party, self," which is insurance speak for "This mess is your own damn fault." And the repair bill, $16,800.00. Roof, cabinets, drywall, broken pipe, ruined appliances, all of it. Karen tried to appeal. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she accused me of sabotaging the tree, said I let it rot to get revenge on her. But when the insurance inspector reviewed the video of her tree guy lopping off the weight-bearing branch, he actually added a second note to the file. "Tree instability caused by improper cutting. External liability confirmed." Boom. Game over. Meanwhile, the HOA was imploding. Erin tried to rally support, but no one would stand with her. Melissa, her usual sidekick, stopped showing up to board meetings altogether. Stan had stepped in as interim president, and his first act was to propose a revision to HOA bylaws limiting unilateral landscaping decisions and increasing property owner protections. It passed unanimously. For the first time in years, people actually felt like they had a say. No more surprise fines. No more passive-aggressive letters about garden gnomes or the shade of your front door. It was glorious. And Karen? She sulked. For weeks. No more porch patrols. No more aggressive bulletin updates. She just stayed inside, blinds drawn, while her roof repairs stalled, and her reputation crumbled faster than the drywall in her kitchen. But she still had one last card to play. One afternoon, I got a knock on my door. Not 3 sharp taps like she used to do, but one long, drawn-out thud. I opened it to find her standing there, arms crossed, lips pursed. She didn't say hello. She just said, "If you think you've won, you haven't." I raised an eyebrow. Didn't realize we were in a contest. "I've spoken to an attorney," she snapped. "You're not untouchable." I sighed. "Karen, you broke the law. You trespassed. You damaged my property. That tree fell on your house because you destabilized it. The insurance knows it. The HOA knows it. Even the squirrels probably know it." She narrowed her eyes. "Enjoy your moment, but it won't last." I shrugged. "I don't need a moment. I just want a roof that doesn't leak and a tree that's allowed to grow." She turned to walk away, then stopped. "Do you really think people want you in charge of this neighborhood?" I gave her a small smile. "I don't think they want me in charge. I think they just didn't want you anymore." That was it. She left, no more words, just the bitter sound of shoes on pavement and a dignity that cracked harder than her drywall. Later that week, I got word that Karen had quietly listed her house. No open house, no fancy signs, Just a plain listing priced low as is. Her reputation had made it harder to sell than she expected. Buyers don't love the idea of inheriting a feud with the neighborhood. One realtor even asked Stan, "Wait, is this the house with the tree thing?" She eventually found a buyer, a contractor who specialized in flip jobs, cash offer, fast close. And just like that, she was gone. No farewell, no apology. Just gone. The morning Karen left, it was quiet. No yelling, no stomping, no dramatic farewell speeches. Just a rented U-Haul, 2 sweaty movers, and a worn-out woman who used to terrorize our neighborhood with a clipboard and an inflated sense of power. I watched from my porch, coffee in hand, as she loaded up the last box. It had a plastic flamingo sticking out the top and one of those live, laugh, love plaques that had probably been hanging in her kitchen when the tree limb crashed through the ceiling. Fitting, really. She didn't look at me. She didn't wave. She just climbed into the passenger seat, slammed the door, and rode off without ever turning her head. And just like that, Karen was gone. What came next was the most beautiful thing of all. Peace. No more early morning HOA violation notices. No more lectures about community standards. No more anxiety walking to your own mailbox. Stan was officially voted in as HOA president, not because he wanted to be, but because he was the only person everyone actually trusted. And the rest of us? We started living again. To the tree, it wasn't dead. Damaged, sure. Scarred, but not done. The arborist and I made a plan. We trimmed back the splintered edges, reinforced one of the larger branches with a support cable, and planted a smaller oak nearby. Its eventual replacement, one day far in the future. "I can't believe it's still standing," my neighbor Michelle said one evening. I nodded. "Yeah, well, some roots run deep. We even gave the old oak a name, Justice. It stuck. That tree had endured pruning, sabotage, a storm, and HOA tyranny. And it still cast shade over the sidewalk like nothing ever happened. Talk about resilience. A few weeks later, we hosted a neighborhood cookout. No agenda, no rules, just people bringing food and folding chairs and stories. Kids ran around barefoot. Dogs chased frisbees. And for the first time in a long time, people didn't feel like they had to perform some fake version of suburban perfection. They just were. Someone asked if I was going to run for the HOA. I laughed. I think I've met my HOA drama quota for a lifetime. But I did put in a request for one thing. A tiny brass plaque installed at the base of Justice. It reads, "This tree stood tall through it all. May we all grow like this, scarred, rooted, and unbothered by Karens." The moral? Don't mess with someone's roots. Don't cut what you don't understand. And never, ever underestimate a man with a tree, a camera, and a legal folder thick enough to knock your kitchen wall off its hinges. Karen thought she was above the rules. Turns out, gravity had other plans. Thanks for watching. If you've ever dealt with a neighbor who thinks they're the sheriff of suburbia, drop your story in the comments. Justice and I will be there reading.